Introduction. The Buddha's awakening gave him, among other things, a new perspective on the uses and limitations of words. He had discovered a reality, the deathless, that no words could describe. At the same time, he discovered that the path to awakening could be described, although it involved a new way of seeing and conceptualizing the problem of suffering and stress. Because ordinary concepts were often poor tools for teaching the path, he had to invent new concepts and to stretch pre-existing words to encompass those concepts so that others could taste awakening themselves. One of the new concepts most central to his teaching was that of the khandhas, usually translated into English as aggregates. Prior to the Buddha, the Pali word khandha had very ordinary meanings. A khandha could be a pile, a bundle, a heap, a mass. It could also be the trunk of a tree. In his first sermon, though, the Buddha gave it a new, psychological meaning, introducing the term, clinging khandhas, to summarize his analysis of the truth of stress and suffering. Throughout the remainder of his teaching career, he referred to these psychological khandhas time and again. Their importance in his teachings has thus been obvious to every generation of Buddhists ever since. Less obvious, though, has been the issue of how they are important. How should a meditator make use of the concept of the psychological khandhas? What questions are they meant to answer? The most common response to these questions is best exemplified by two recent scholarly books devoted to the subject. Both treat the khandhas as the Buddha's answer to the question, "What is a person?" To quote from the jacket of the first. If Buddhism denies a permanent self, how does it perceive identity? What we conventionally call a person can be understood in terms of 5 aggregates, the sum of which must not be taken for a permanent entity, since beings are nothing but an amalgam of ever-changing phenomena. Without a thorough understanding of the 5 aggregates, we cannot grasp the liberation process at work within the individual, who is, after all, simply an amalgam of the 5 aggregates. From the introduction of the other. The third key teaching is given by the Buddha in context when he is asked about individual identity, when people want to know, what am I? What is my real self? The Buddha says that individuality should be understood in terms of a combination of phenomena which appear to form the physical and mental continuum of an individual life. In such contexts, the human being is analyzed into 5 constituents, the pancake khandha, 5 aggregates. This understanding of the khandhas isn't confined to scholars. Almost any modern Buddhist meditation teacher would explain the khandhas in a similar way, and it isn't a modern innovation. It was first proposed at the beginning of the Common Era in the commentaries to the early Buddhist canons, both the Theravadan and the Sarvastivadin, which formed the basis for Mahayana scholasticism. However, once the commentaries used the khandhas to define what a person is, they spawned many of the controversies that have plagued Buddhist thinking ever since. If a person is just khandhas, then what gets reborn? If a person is just khandhas, and the khandhas are annihilated on reaching total nibbana, then isn't total nibbana the annihilation of the person? If a person is khandhas, and khandhas are interrelated with other khandhas, how can one person enter nibbana without dragging everyone else along? A large part of the history of Buddhist thought has been the story of ingenious but unsuccessful attempts to settle these questions. It's instructive to note, though, that the Pali Canon never quotes the Buddha as trying to answer them. In fact, it never quotes him as trying to define what a person is at all. Instead, it quotes him as saying that to define yourself in any way is to limit yourself, and that the question, "What am I?" is best ignored. This suggests that he formulated the concept of the khandhas to answer other, different questions. If, as meditators, we want to make the best use of this concept, we should look at what those original questions were and determine how they apply to our practice. The canon depicts the Buddha as saying that he taught only 2 topics, suffering and the end of suffering, section 2. A survey of the Pali discourses shows him using the concept of the khandhas to answer the primary questions related to those topics. What is suffering? How is it caused? What can be done to bring those causes to an end? The Buddha introduced the concept of the khandhas in his first sermon in response to the first of these questions. His short definition of suffering was, the 5 clinging khandhas. This fairly cryptic phrase can be fleshed out by drawing on other passages in the canon. The 5 khandhas are bundles or piles of form, feeling, perception, fabrications, and consciousness. None of the texts explain why the Buddha used the word khandha to describe these things. The meaning of tree trunk may be relevant to the pervasive fire imagery in the canon, nibbana being extinguishing of the fires of passion, aversion, and delusion, but none of the texts explicitly make this connection. The common and explicit image is of the khandhas as burdensome, section 22. We can think of them as piles of bricks we carry on our shoulders. However, these piles are best understood not as objects, but as activities, for an important passage, section 7, defines them in terms of their functions. Form, which covers physical phenomena of all sorts, both within and without the body, wears down or deforms. Feeling feels pleasure, pain, and neither pleasure nor pain. Perception labels or identifies objects. Consciousness cognizes the six senses, counting the intellect as the sixth, along with their objects. Of the five khandhas, fabrication is the most complex. Passages in the canon define it as intention, but it includes a wide variety of activities such as attention, evaluation section 14, and all the active processes of the mind. It is also the most fundamental khandha, for its intentional activity underlies the experience of form, feeling, etc. in the present moment. Thus, intention is an integral part of our experience of all the khandhas, an important point, for this means that there is an element of intention in all suffering. This opens the possibility that suffering can be ended by changing our intentions or abandoning them entirely, which is precisely the point of the Buddhist teachings. To understand how this happens, we have to look more closely at how suffering arises, or in other words, how khandhas become clinging khandhas. When khandhas are experienced, the process of fabrication normally doesn't simply stop there. If attention focuses on the khandha's attractive features, beautiful forms, pleasant feelings, etc., it can give rise to passion and delight, section 36. This passion and delight can take many forms, but the most tenacious is the habitual act of fabricating a sense of me or mine, identifying with a particular khandha, or set of khandhas, or claiming possession of it. This sense of me and mine is rarely static. It roams like an amoeba, changing its contours as it changes location. Sometimes expansive, sometimes contracted, it can view itself as identical with a khandha, as possessing a khandha, as existing within a khandha, or as having a khandha existing within itself, section 24. At times feeling finite, at other times infinite, section 25, whatever shape it takes it's always unstable and insecure, for the khandhas providing its food are simply activities and functions, inconstant and insubstantial. In the words of the canon, the khandhas are like foam, like a mirage, like the bubbles formed when rain falls on water, section 44. They're heavy only because the iron grip of trying to cling to them is burdensome. As long as we're addicted to passion and delight for these activities, as long as we cling to them, we're bound to suffer. The Buddhist approach to ending this clinging, however, is not simply to drop it. As with any addiction, the mind has to be gradually weaned away. Before we can reach the point of no intention, where we're totally freed from the fabrication of khandhas, we have to change our intentions toward the khandhas so as to change their functions. Instead of using them for the purpose of constructing a self, we use them for the purpose of creating a path to the end of suffering. Instead of carrying piles of bricks on our shoulders, we take them off and lay them along the ground as pavement. The first step in this process is to use the khandhas to construct the factors of the Noble Eightfold Path. For example, right concentration. Each of the four jhanas and the first three formless attainments are called perception attainments, for they are based on maintaining a steady perception of the object of meditation, section 31. In the first jhana, for instance, we maintain a steady perception focused on an aspect of form, such as the breath, and use directed thought and evaluation, which count as fabrications, to create feelings of pleasure and refreshment, which we spread through the body, section 29. In the beginning, it's normal that we experience passion and delight for these feelings, and that consciousness follows along in line with them. This helps get us absorbed in mastering the skills of concentration. Once we've gained the sense of strength and well-being that comes from mastering these skills, we can proceed to the second step, attending to the drawbacks of even the refined khandhas we experience in concentration, so as to undercut the passion and delight we might feel for them. Suppose that an archer or archer's apprentice were to practice on a straw man or mound of clay, so that after a while he would become able to shoot long distances, to fire accurate shots in rapid succession, and to pierce great masses. In the same way, there is the case where a monk enters and remains in the first jhana, rapture and pleasure born of seclusion, accompanied by directed thought and evaluation. He regards whatever phenomena there that are connected with form, feeling, perceptions, fabrications, and consciousness as inconstant, stressful, a disease, a cancer, an arrow, painful, an affliction, alien, a disintegration, a emptiness, not self. Similarly with the other levels of jhana. Section 31. The various ways of fostering dispassion are also khandhas, khandhas of perception. A standard list includes the following: the perception of inconstancy, the perception of not self, the perception of unattractiveness, the perception of drawbacks, the diseases to which the body is subject, the perception of abandoning, the perception of distaste for every world, the perception of the undesirability of all fabrications. Section 32. One of the most important of these perceptions is that of not self. When the Buddha first introduced the concept of not self in his second sermon, SN 2259, see section 52, he also introduced a way of strengthening its impact with a series of questions based around the khandhas. Taking each khandha in turn, he asked, is it constant or inconstant? Inconstant. And is what is inconstant stressful or pleasurable? Stressful. And is it fitting to regard what is inconstant, stressful, subject to change as, this is mine, this is myself, this is what I am? No. These questions show the complex role the khandhas play in this second step of the path. The questions themselves are khandhas, a fabrication, and they use the concept of the khandhas to deconstruct any passion and delight that might center on the khandhas and create suffering. Thus, in this step, we use khandhas that point out the drawbacks of the khandhas. If used unskillfully, though, these perceptions and fabrications can simply replace passion with its mirror image, aversion. This is why they have to be based on the first step, the well-being constructed in jhana, and coupled with the third step, the perceptions of dispassion and cessation that incline the mind to the deathless. This is peace, this is exquisite, the pacification of all fabrications, the relinquishing of all acquisitions, the ending of craving, dispassion, cessation, unbinding. Section 31. In effect, these are perception khandhas that point the mind beyond all khandhas. The texts say that this three-step process can lead to one of two results. If, after undercutting passion and delight for the khandhas, the mind contains any residual passion for the perception of the deathless, it will attain the third level of awakening, called non-return. If passion and delight are entirely eradicated, though, all clinging is entirely abandoned, the intentions that fabricate khandhas are dropped, and the mind totally released. The bricks of the pavement have turned into a runway, and the mind has taken off. Into what? The authors of the discourses seem unwilling to say, even to the extent of describing it as a state of existence, non-existence, neither, or both. Sections 49 to 51. As one of the discourses states, the freedom lying beyond the khandhas also lies beyond the realm to which language properly applies. Section 49, see also and 4 to 173. There is also the very real practical problem that any preconceived notions of that freedom, if clung to as a perception khandha, could easily act as an obstacle to its attainment. Still, there is also the possibility that, if properly used, such a perception khandha might act as an aid on the path. So the discourses provide hints in the form of similes, referring to total freedom as the unfabricated, the unbent, the effluent free, the true, the beyond, the subtle, the very hard to see, the ageless, permanence, the undecaying, the surfaceless, non-objectification, peace, the deathless, the exquisite, bliss, rest, the ending of craving, the amazing, the astounding, the secure, security, unbinding, the unafflicted, dispassion, purity, release, attachment-free, the island, shelter, harbor, refuge, the ultimate. SN 43 to 1 to 44. Other passages mention a consciousness in this freedom, without surface, without end, luminous all around, lying outside of time and space, experienced when the six sense spheres stop functioning. Section 54. In this it differs from the consciousness khandha, which depends on the six sense spheres and can be described in such terms as near or far, past, present, or future. One passage, section 20, describes consciousness without surface metaphorically as a light beam that lands nowhere, and that it doesn't land on any of the nutriments that would allow for birth or the maintenance of being once born. This consciousness is thus the awareness of awakening. And the freedom of this awareness carries over even when the awakened person returns to ordinary consciousness, as the Buddha said of himself. Freed, dissociated, and released from form, the Tathagata dwells with unrestricted awareness. Freed, dissociated, and released from feeling, perception, fabrications, consciousness, birth, aging, death, suffering and stress, defilement. Section 56. This shows again the importance of bringing the right questions to the teachings on the khandhas. If you use them to define what you are as a person, you tie yourself down to no purpose. The questions keep piling on. But if you use them to put an end to suffering, your questions fall away and you're free. You never again cling to the khandhas and no longer need to use them to end your self-created suffering. As long as you're still alive, you can employ the khandhas as needed for whatever skillful uses you see fit. After that, you're liberated from all uses and needs, including the need to find words to describe that freedom to yourself or to anyone else. The questions. Section 1. There are some cases in which a person overcome with pain, his mind exhausted, grieves, mourns, laments, beats his breast, and becomes bewildered. Or one overcome with pain, his mind exhausted, comes to search outside. Who knows a way or two to stop this pain? I tell you, monks, that stress results either in bewilderment or in search. N. 663. Section 2. Both formerly and now, it is only stress that I describe, and the cessation of stress. SN 2286. Section 3. Then. Sariputta said, Friends, in foreign lands there are wise nobles and Brahmins, householders and contemplatives, for the people there are wise and discriminating, who will question a monk, What is your teacher's doctrine? What does he teach? Thus asked, you should answer, Our teacher teaches the subduing of passion and desire. Having thus been answered, there may be wise nobles and Brahmins, householders and contemplatives, who will question you further, and your teacher teaches the subduing of passion and desire for what? Thus asked, you should answer, Our teacher teaches the subduing of passion and desire for form, for feeling, for perception, for fabrications. Our teacher teaches the subduing of passion and desire for consciousness. Having thus been answered, there may be wise nobles and Brahmins, householders and contemplatives, who will question you further, and seeing what danger does your teacher teach the subduing of passion and desire for form, for feeling, for perception, for fabrications. Seeing what danger does your teacher teach the subduing of passion and desire for consciousness? Thus asked, you should answer, when one is not free from passion, desire, love, thirst, fever, and craving for form, then from any change and alteration in that form, there arises sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. When one is not free from passion, for feeling, for perception, for fabrications, when one is not free from passion, desire, love, thirst, fever, and craving for consciousness, then from any change and alteration in that consciousness, there arise sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. Seeing this danger, our teacher teaches the subduing of passion and desire for form, for feeling, for perception, for fabrications. Seeing this danger, our teacher teaches the subduing of passion and desire for consciousness. Having thus been answered, there may be wise nobles and Brahmins, householders and contemplatives, who will question you further, and seeing what benefit does your teacher teach the subduing of passion and desire for form, for feeling, for perception, for fabrications. Seeing what benefit does your teacher teach the subduing of passion and desire for consciousness? Thus asked, you should answer, when one is free from passion, desire, love, thirst, fever, and craving for form, then with any change and alteration in that form, there does not arise any sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, or despair, when one is free from passion, for feeling, for perception, for fabrications. When one is free from passion, desire, love, thirst, fever, and craving for consciousness, then with any change and alteration in that consciousness, there does not arise any sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, or despair. Seeing this benefit, our teacher teaches the subduing of passion and desire for form, for feeling, for perception, for fabrications. Seeing this benefit, our teacher teaches the subduing of passion and desire for consciousness. Ascend 22-2, Section 4. And what is the middle way realized by the Tathagata that, producing vision, producing knowledge, leads to calm, to direct knowledge, to self-awakening, to unbinding? Precisely this Noble Eightfold Path, right view, right resolve, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. Ascend 56:11. Constructing the Aggregates. Section 5. Monks, from an inconceivable beginning comes transmigration. A beginning point is not evident, although beings hindered by ignorance and fettered by craving are transmigrating and wandering on. It's just as when a dog is tied by a leash to a post or stake. If it walks right around that post or stake. If it stands right next to that post or stake. If it sits right next to that post or stake. If it lies down right next to that post or stake. In the same way, an uninstructed run-of-the-mill person regards form as, this is mine, this is myself, this is what I am. He regards feeling, perception, fabrications, consciousness as, this is mine, this is myself, this is what I am. If he walks right around these 5 clinging aggregates. If he stands right next to these 5 clinging aggregates. If he sits right next to these 5 clinging aggregates. If he lies down right next to these 5 clinging aggregates. Thus one should reflect on one's mind with every moment. For a long time has this mind been defiled by passion, aversion, and illusion. From the defilement of the mind are beings defiled. From the purification of the mind are beings purified. Monks, have you ever seen a moving picture show? Yes, Lord. That moving picture show was created by the mind. And this mind is even more variegated than a moving picture show. Thus one should reflect on one's mind with every moment. For a long time has this mind been defiled by passion, aversion, and delusion. From the defilement of the mind are beings defiled. From the purification of the mind are beings purified. Monks, I can imagine no one group of beings more variegated than that of common animals. Common animals are created by mind, and the mind is even more variegated than common animals. Thus one should reflect on one's mind with every moment. For a long time has this mind been defiled by passion, aversion, and delusion. From the defilement of the mind are beings defiled. From the purification of the mind are beings purified. It's just as when, there being dye, lac, yellow orpiment, indigo, or crimson, a dyer or painter would paint the picture of a woman or a man, complete in all its parts, on a well-polished panel or wall, or on a piece of cloth. In the same way, an uninstructed, run-of-the-mill person, when creating, creates nothing but form. Feeling, perception, fabrications, consciousness. Ascend 22-100. Section 6. At Saveth. There the Blessed One said, Monks, I will teach you the 5 aggregates and the 5 clinging aggregates. Listen and pay close attention, I will speak. As you say, Lord, the monks responded. The Blessed One said, Now what, monks, are the 5 aggregates? Whatever form is past, future, or present, internal or external, blatant or subtle, common or sublime, far or near, that is called the form aggregate. Whatever feeling is past, future, or present, internal or external, blatant or subtle, common or sublime, far or near, that is called the feeling aggregate. Whatever perception is past, future, or present, internal or external, blatant or subtle, common or sublime, far or near, that is called the perception aggregate. Whatever fabrications are past, future, or present, internal or external, blatant or subtle, common or sublime, far or near, those are called the fabrication aggregate. Whatever consciousness is past, future, or present, internal or external, blatant or subtle, common or sublime, far or near, that is called the consciousness aggregate. These are called the 5 aggregates. And what are the 5 clinging aggregates? Whatever form, past, future, or present, internal or external, blatant or subtle, common or sublime, far or near, is clingable, offers sustenance, and is accompanied with mental effluence, asava, that is called the form clinging aggregate. Whatever feeling, past, future, or present, internal or external, blatant or subtle, common or sublime, far or near, is clingable, offers sustenance, and is accompanied with mental effluent, that is called the feeling clinging aggregate. Whatever perception, past, future, or present, internal or external, blatant or subtle, common or sublime, far or near, is clingable, offers sustenance, and is accompanied with mental effluence, that is called the perception clinging aggregate. Whatever fabrications, past, future, or present, internal or external, blatant or subtle, common or sublime, far or near, are clingable, offer sustenance, and are accompanied with mental effluence, those are called the fabrication clinging aggregate. Whatever consciousness, past, future, or present, internal or external, blatant or subtle, common or sublime, far or near, is clingable, offers sustenance, and is accompanied with mental effluence, that is called the consciousness clinging aggregate. These are called the 5 clinging aggregates. SN 2248, Section 7. And why do you call it form, rupa? Because it is afflicted, rapati, thus it is called form. Afflicted with what? With cold and heat and hunger and thirst, with the touch of flies, mosquitoes, wind, sun, and reptiles. Because it is afflicted, it is called form. And why do you call it feeling? Because it feels, thus it is called feeling. What does it feel? It feels pleasure, it feels pain, it feels neither pleasure nor pain. Because it feels, it is called feeling. And why do you call it perception? Because it perceives, thus it is called perception. What does it perceive? It perceives blue, it perceives yellow, it perceives red, it perceives white. Because it perceives, it is called perception. And why do you call them fabrications? Because they fabricate fabricated things, thus they are called fabrications. What do they fabricate into a fabricated thing? For the sake of formness, they fabricate form as a fabricated thing. For the sake of feelingness, they fabricate feeling as a fabricated thing. For the sake of perceptionhood, for the sake of fabricationhood, for the sake of consciousnesshood, they fabricate consciousness as a fabricated thing. Because they fabricate fabricated things, they are called fabrications. See Section 18. And why do you call it consciousness? Because it cognizes, thus it is called consciousness. What does it cognize? It cognizes what is sour, bitter, pungent, sweet, alkaline, non-alkaline, salty, and unsalty. Because it cognizes, it is called consciousness. SN 2279, Section 8. Form. Then Sariputta. And what, friends, is the form clinging aggregate? The 4 great existents and the form derived from them. And what are the 4 great existents? They are the earth property, the liquid property, the fire property, and the wind property. And what is the earth property? The earth property can be either internal or external. What is the internal earth property? Whatever internal, within oneself, is hard, solid, and sustained by craving. Head hairs, body hairs, nails, teeth, skin, flesh, tendons, bones, bone marrow, kidneys, heart, liver, pleura, spleen, lungs, large intestines, small intestines, contents of the stomach, feces, or whatever else internal, within oneself, is hard, solid, and sustained. This is called the internal earth property. And what is the liquid property? The liquid property may be either internal or external. What is the internal liquid property? Whatever internal, belonging to oneself, is liquid, watery, and sustained. Bile, phlegm, pus, blood, sweat, fat, tears, skin oil, saliva, mucus, fluid in the joints, urine, or whatever else internal, within oneself, is liquid, watery, and sustained. This is called the internal liquid property. And what is the fire property? The fire property may be either internal or external. What is the internal fire property? Whatever internal, belonging to oneself, is fire, fiery and sustained, that by which the body is warmed, aged, and consumed with fever, and that by which what is eaten, drunk, chewed, and savored gets properly digested, or whatever else internal, within oneself, is fire, fiery, and sustained. This is called the internal fire property. And what is the wind property? The wind property may be either internal or external. What is the internal wind property? Whatever internal, belonging to oneself, is wind, windy, and sustained. Upgoing winds, downgoing winds, winds in the stomach, winds in the intestines, winds that course through the body, in and out breathing, or whatever else internal, within oneself, is wind, windy, and sustained. This is called the internal wind property. MN 28. Section 9. Feeling. And what is feeling? These 6 bodies of feeling: feeling born of eye contact, feeling born of ear contact, feeling born of nose contact, feeling born of tongue contact, feeling born of body contact, feeling born of intellect contact. This is called feeling. SN 2257. Section 10. Sister Dhammadina. There are 3 kinds of feeling: pleasant feeling, painful feeling, and neither pleasant nor painful feeling. Whatever is experienced physically or mentally as pleasant and gratifying is pleasant feeling. Whatever is experienced physically or mentally as painful and hurting is painful feeling. Whatever is experienced physically or mentally as neither gratifying nor hurting is neither pleasant nor painful feeling. Pleasant feeling is pleasant in remaining and painful in changing. Painful feeling is painful in remaining and pleasant in changing. Neither pleasant nor painful feeling is pleasant when conjoined with knowledge, and painful when devoid of knowledge. MN 44. Section 11. Perception. And what is perception? These 6 bodies of perception: perception of form, perception of sound, perception of smell, perception of taste, perception of tactile sensation, perception of ideas. This is called perception. SN 2257. Section 12. Fabrications. And what are fabrications? There are these 6 classes of intention: intention aimed at sights, sounds, smells, tastes, tactile sensations, and ideas. These are called fabrications. SN 2257. Section 13. 3 kinds of fabrications: meritorious fabrications, ripening in pleasure; demeritorious fabrications, ripening in pain; and imperturbable fabrications, the formless jhanas. DN 33. Section 14. Visakha. And what, lady, are bodily fabrications? What are verbal fabrications? What are mental fabrications? Sister Dhammadina. In and out breathing is bodily, bound up with the body, therefore is it called a bodily fabrication. Having directed one's thought and evaluated the matter, one breaks into speech, therefore directed thought and evaluation are called verbal fabrications. Perception and feeling are mental, bound up with the mind, therefore perception and feeling are called mental fabrications. MN 44. Section 15. Consciousness. And what is consciousness? These 6 bodies of consciousness: eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, tongue consciousness, body consciousness, intellect consciousness. This is called consciousness. SN 2257. Section 16. Conditional relations. From the origination of nutriment comes the origination of form. From the cessation of nutriment comes the cessation of form. From the origination of contact comes the origination of feeling. From the cessation of contact comes the cessation of feeling. From the origination of contact comes the origination of perception. From the cessation of contact comes the cessation of perception. From the origination of contact comes the origination of fabrications. From the cessation of contact comes the cessation of fabrications. From the origination of name and form comes the origination of consciousness. From the cessation of name and form comes the cessation of consciousness. SN 2257, Section 17. A certain monk. Lord, what is the cause, what the condition for the delineation of the form aggregate? What is the cause, what the condition for the delineation of the feeling aggregate, perception aggregate, fabrication aggregate, consciousness aggregate? The Buddha. Monk, the four great existents, earth, water, fire, and wind, are the cause, the four great existents the condition for the delineation of the form aggregate. Contact is the cause, contact the condition for the delineation of the feeling aggregate. Contact is the cause, contact the condition for the delineation of the perception aggregate. Contact is the cause, contact the condition for the delineation of the fabrication aggregate. Name and form is the cause, name and form the condition for the delineation of the consciousness aggregate. MN 109. Section 18. From ignorance as a requisite condition come fabrications. From fabrications as a requisite condition comes consciousness. From consciousness as a requisite condition comes name and form. From name and form as a requisite condition come the six sense media. From the six sense media as a requisite condition comes contact. From contact as a requisite condition comes feeling. From feeling as a requisite condition comes craving. From craving as a requisite condition comes clinging/sustenance. From clinging/sustenance as a requisite condition comes becoming. From becoming as a requisite condition comes birth. From birth as a requisite condition, then aging and death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, distress, and despair come into play. Such is the origination of this entire mass of stress and suffering. And what is feeling? These six are classes of feeling: feeling born from eye contact, feeling born from ear contact, feeling born from nose contact, feeling born from tongue contact, feeling born from body contact, feeling born from intellect contact. This is called feeling. And what is contact? These six are classes of contact: eye contact, ear contact, nose contact, tongue contact, body contact, intellect contact. This is called contact. And what are the six sense media? These six are sense media: the eye medium, the ear medium, the nose medium, the tongue medium, the body medium, the intellect medium. These are called the six sense media. And what is name and form? Feeling, perception, intention, contact, and attention. This is called name. The four great elements in the form dependent on the four great elements. This is called form. This name and this form are called name and form. And what is consciousness? These six are classes of consciousness: eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, tongue consciousness, body consciousness, intellect consciousness. This is called consciousness. And what are fabrications? These three are fabrications: bodily fabrications, verbal fabrications, mental fabrications. These are called fabrications. See Section 14. And what is ignorance? Not knowing stress, not knowing the origination of stress, not knowing the cessation of stress, not knowing the way of practice leading to the cessation of stress. This is called ignorance. SN 12-2. Section 19. From consciousness as a requisite condition comes name and form. Thus it has been said. And this is the way to understand how from consciousness as a requisite condition comes name and form. If consciousness were not to descend into the mother's womb, would name and form take shape in the womb? No, Lord. If, after descending into the womb, consciousness were to depart, would name and form be produced for this world? No, Lord. If the consciousness of the young boy or girl were to be cut off, would name and form ripen, grow, and reach maturity? No, Lord. Thus this is a cause, this is a reason, this is an origination, this is a requisite condition for name and form, i.e., consciousness. From name and form as a requisite condition comes consciousness. Thus it has been said. And this is the way to understand how from name and form as a requisite condition comes consciousness. If consciousness were not to gain a foothold in name and form, would a coming into play of the origination of birth, aging, death, and stress in the future be discerned? No, Lord. Thus this is a cause, this is a reason, this is an origination, this is a requisite condition for consciousness, i.e., name and form. This is the extent to which there is birth, aging, death, passing away, and re-arising. This is the extent to which there are means of designation, expression, and delineation. This is the extent to which the dimension of discernment extends, the extent to which the cycle revolves for the manifesting discernibility of this world, i.e., name and form together with consciousness. DN 15, Section 20. There are these four nutriments for the establishing of beings who have taken birth, or for the support of those in search of a place to be born. Which four? Physical food, gross or refined, contact as the second, consciousness the third, and intellectual intention the fourth. These are the four nutriments for the establishing of beings or for the support of those in search of a place to be born. Where there is passion, delight, and craving for the nutriment of physical food, consciousness lands there and grows. Where consciousness lands and grows, name and form alights. Where name and form alights, there is the growth of fabrications. Where there is the growth of fabrications, there is the production of renewed becoming in the future. Where there is the production of renewed becoming in the future, there is future birth, aging, and death, together, I tell you, with sorrow, affliction, and despair. Just as, when there is dye, lac, yellow orpiment, indigo, or crimson, a dyer or painter would paint the picture of a woman or a man, complete in all its parts, on a well-polished panel or wall, or on a piece of cloth. In the same way, where there is passion, delight, and craving for the nutriment of physical food, consciousness lands there and grows. Together, I tell you, with sorrow, affliction, and despair. Similarly with the other three kinds of nutriment. Where there is no passion for the nutriment of physical food, where there is no delight, no craving, then consciousness does not land there or grow, name and form does not alight, there is no growth of fabrications. There is no production of renewed becoming in the future. Where there is no production of renewed becoming in the future, there is no future birth, aging, and death. That, I tell you, has no sorrow, affliction, or despair. Just as if there were a roofed house or a roofed hall having windows on the north, the south, or the east. When the sun rises and a ray has entered by way of the window, where does it land? On the western wall, Lord. And if there is no western wall? On the ground, Lord. And if there is no ground? On the water, Lord. And if there is no water? It does not land, Lord. In the same way, where there is no passion for the nutriment of physical food, consciousness does not land or grow. That, I tell you, has no sorrow, affliction, or despair. See sections 53 to 54. Similarly with the other three kinds of nutriment. SN 1264. Section 21. Monks, there are these 5 means of propagation. Which 5? Root propagation, stem propagation, joint propagation, cutting propagation, and seed propagation as the 5th. And if these 5 means of propagation are not broken, not rotten, not damaged by wind and sun, mature and well buried, but there is no earth and no water, would they exhibit growth, increase, and proliferation? No, Lord. And if these 5 means of propagation are broken, rotten, damaged by wind and sun, immature, and poorly buried, but there is earth and water, would they exhibit growth, increase, and proliferation? No, Lord. And if these 5 means of propagation are not broken, not rotten, not damaged by wind and sun, mature and well buried, and there is earth and water, would they exhibit growth, increase, and proliferation? Yes, Lord. Like the earth property, monks, is how the four standing spots for consciousness should be seen. Like the liquid property is how delight and passion should be seen. Like the five means of propagation is how consciousness together with its nutriment should be seen. Should consciousness, when taking a stance, stand attached to form, supported by form as its object, established on form, watered with delight, it would exhibit growth, increase, and proliferation. Should consciousness, when taking a stance, stand attached to feeling, supported by feeling as its object, established on feeling, watered with delight, it would exhibit growth, increase, and proliferation. Should consciousness, when taking a stance, stand attached to perception, supported by perception as its object, established on perception, watered with delight, it would exhibit growth, increase, and proliferation. Should consciousness, when taking a stance, stand attached to fabrications, supported by fabrications as its object, established on fabrications, watered with delight, it would exhibit growth, increase, and proliferation. Were someone to say, I will describe a coming, a going, a passing away, an arising, a growth, an increase, or a proliferation of consciousness apart from form, from feeling, from perception, from fabrications, that would be impossible. SN 2254.